Welcome home, everyone. Welcome home. Today we are talking about affordable housing while living here in America. But today we're going to talk a little bit something different. We're not going to talk to the tenants today. I am talking to the landlords, the Section 8 landlords out there, guys. Let me just say right off the bat, though, I was reading an article about credit scores, and the article was talking about, do we have our parents' credit scores? Are the credit scores, are they getting better or are they getting worse? So credit scores as a generation, as of March 2024, it said that the Gen Z 18 to 27 have an average score of about 665, guys. The millennials 28 to 43 have an average credit score of 687. Gen X 44 to 59 have an average credit score of 710. And the baby boomers from 60 to 78 have an average credit score of about 746. And the silent generation 79 to 96 has an average credit score of 750. Now, I know that seems to be the average, but sometimes, when people are in a low income bracket, sometimes things have happened that have put them at a disadvantage with the credit score. So what I am here to talk about today, guys, for the Section 8 landlords is sometimes as a landlord these days for Section 8, a lot of people do not check the credit history. They just go by their payment history. All right, so that helps make up to be a good mix to decide if you want to take on a tenant or not. So let's talk about also how to stream tenants. Let's talk about the Section 8 application, all of that stuff, or getting the tenants rather, because I just talk about Section 8 on here. So let's just go through some stuff that I put together for you landlords. All right, so here are some key considerations. All right, so due to fair housing laws and the involvement of the local housing authorities, here is your step-by-step guide to screening your tenants. All right, so first of all, you need to understand what your local laws are, guys. You need to understand what those local laws are. Some states and cities prohibit discrimination based on a source of income, meaning that you cannot reject an applicant just because they have a Section 8 voucher. All right, so check with your local housing authorities for regulations on Section 8 tenant screening. Also, you want to set a standard for your tenant criteria. You want to look for a minimum credit score, but we just talked about that credit score. We talked about most people not having such a great credit score, especially when they have fallen off sometimes or in low income. Maybe they couldn't afford to pay a car note or something and it had to fall off. But that's not always the case. Just because you're low income doesn't mean that your credit score is bad. There are a lot of people with very good credit scores. But the main thing, though, for screening your tenants for Section 8 is that you just want to kind of make sure about the rental histories. I would think more so than a credit score. You want to look at late payments. You want to look at evictions. You want to look at what their income requirements are going to be for you. And we will talk about that further on in the video. All right, so if allowed, Section 8 covers a portion of the tenant's rent. So a lot of times the rent for the tenant is not a whole lot, that the majority of the rent sometimes gets covered by Section 8. So with the criminal background checks, when you're screening your tenants for Section 8, you want to check for HUD guidelines, all right? So check for those HUD guidelines. Also, you want to ask some very pertinent questions. You want to do some pre-screening questions. You want to ask the applicant such things as how many people will live in your units, just like you would with your non-Section 8 tenants. You want to ask them how soon are they looking to move, if they have any pets, can they provide references from past landlords, which will be good, give you a good idea of what kind of tenant they will be. But I know a lot of you are wanting to become or thinking and considering to become Section 8 landlords, but you're just kind of on the fence about it, right? You're new to all of this, but you want to also, after pre-screening, you want to think of things, like I said, the main thing, most important probably is the rental history. You want to verify that. Okay, so if they don't have any references from past landlords, if they are just getting started out, then that would be a little bit more difficult, but you want to find out if they're living with family members. Have they paid anything? Have they paid any on-time payments? Have they had any lease violations, any property damages? All of that you can check for that, and just overall see what the experience is with that particular tenant, your particular tenants. All right, so you can run a background and a credit check, which you can legally run criminal and credit checks, but HUD discourages blanket policies that reject all criminal records. All right, so you want to think about that very carefully. All right, so gotta play around, decide character references here. All right, some Section 8 tenants have lower credit scores. We talked about that, so focusing on rental payment history is important. All right, you want to also, when you're screening your tenants, you want to find out about their vouchers. You want to confirm their income and their voucher amount. You want to make sure that the voucher amount is correct with what the tenant is saying. You want to check with the housing authority. All right, so check if the tenant's portion of the rent is within your income to rent ratio, if that is applicable to you or necessary for you. All right, confirm income and voucher amount. So we talked about that with the housing authority. We also, there's an inspect the unit for approval. So if you approve the tenant, the housing authority will inspect the unit to ensure it meets certain standards before they approve the lease. So you want to talk to your housing authority, and you want to see what the landlord requirements and all of that is to make sure you meet those guidelines. All right, some people are a little skeptical about that. It may not be as an exhaustive list or anything like you think. So if you are a landlord and you are wanting to get into Section 8, you just want to make sure that you are giving the tenants a habitable house to live in, right? You want to give them a habitable, clean house to live in. Everyone deserves that. They have a right for that. All right, so you're going to sign the lease and the Section 8 contract. You're going to understand the lease agreements that comply with the local law. So you're going to go over that with housing authority. Housing authority will then provide a payment contract, and it will outline their portion of the rent and what the applicant's portion of the rent will be. All right, so let's just recap here. So we want to understand our laws and your rights as a landlord, right? I talked about you needed to know about laws about the housing authority and all of that, legal laws, but you also want to know your rights. So not just tenant rights, you want to know your rights as a landlord. All right, let's see here. So you have a right to set a screening criteria. I do know that. So you can do the criminal background and following the HUD guidelines. We talked about eviction history, tenant behavior, their character references, and their rental history. All right. There's also a source of income protections. Many states and cities make it illegal to deny a tenant solely based because they use the Section 8 voucher. So check with your local laws. You do not want to discriminate on family status, race, color, anything like that, religion, sex, national origin, or because they have a Section 8 voucher, okay? So you do not want to say that you're not going to rent to a Section 8 tenant, all right? All right, you want to establish clear and consistent rental criteria. We talked about that. Let's talk about the rental history. Preferably, you might want to consider that they have positive rental references for about at least a year, but a year or two, whatever that you decide. Maybe no evictions within 3 to 5 years, but certainly you can decide on a case-by-case basis. All right, so criminal background per HUD guidelines is usually no drug-related felonies or no violence. All right, so that's usually what they're thinking about in terms of criminal background. All right, so renting a house. income requirements. The landlord requires 2 to 3 times the tenant's portion of the rent, but not the total rents in Section 8 pays a portion. So usually you landlords do charge that amount, but Section 8 is going to pay a portion, and then they'll determine. All right, so we're going to have to look, you're going to have to consider fair market rent as well. All right, so basically that's all that means. All right, so we talked about credit scores, talking about some Section 8 tenants may have lower scores, so that's just something, a given that may be out there that you want to consider. All right, you want to mainly think about the tenant behavior, lease violations, complaints, property damage. And when I say complaints, I'm talking about maybe excessive complaints, something that is major, not anything that is minor, before trying to weed out a tenant. All right, so you want to do those pre-screening questions. So we're just recapping here about how many people are going to be living there, about references, about security deposits and fees, things like that, and also making sure that they have a current Section 8 voucher, okay? All right. So since Section 8 usually does not require does not provide for the full rent, you want to make sure that you find out what the tenant's portion of the rent will be based on the income criteria. You can just flat out, when you do a rental history check, you can just ask and see how you feel about when you ask the tenant straight out if they pay their rent on time. You know, sometimes you don't even have to do a check or a reference check. Sometimes, you know, if you were good, usually would determine, or people will just tell you what they need to tell you right off the back. I know when I rent out, sometimes I ask a roommate or whatever, I just say, you know, just straight up, I'll try to work with you, but you need to let me know ahead of time what's going on, if there's anything on your background check, what your situation is. Do not even attempt to lie. Just let me know where you're living, why the situation, blah, or etc., blah blah blah, because I know life can happen. All right, so you can kind of get a feel sometimes on the energy of the person, but then again, that is on you. But you can do that character reference, and the main thing probably to ask them is, would they rent again to the tenants that you are considering? All right, so recapping on the criminal screening, HUD guidelines on criminal screening is you cannot have a blanket policy rejecting all felons. You can deny tenants with violent and drug-related or property crimes, but you want to consider the nature, the recency, and the severity of the criminal records. All right, so be flexible, as we talked about before, as far as credit history. I cannot stress that enough. So many Section 8 tenants, people, they come on the video, they're in the comments, in the chat, and they're just saying they have the voucher, they were able to secure a housing choice voucher, but it's just so hard trying to find a landlord in their state. That is probably one of the most difficult things. We think sometimes the waiting list, but a lot of people just cannot. They have a certain time limit to find themselves housing. So I say again, be very flexible as far as that credit history. All right, the main thing is people need a home, and if they have employment, or the income rather, and they are able to maintain and want to have a home and just pay you, right? That's important, and that they are not going to destroy your property. All right, so with that being said, what you guys want to look for also is when you are writing, not your leases, but yes, also with your leases, but make sure that you discuss in person, or maybe a Zoom call, something like that. If you're going to schedule an in-person interview, make sure that that the tenant understands your lease agreement, the lease expectations, and the terms. All right, so you guys can agree on it. All right, so agreeing on house rules, maintenance, the guests, the move-in timeline, the required fees, all of that. So trust your instincts on all of that, but make sure that they understand. All right, and they give you that verbal understanding also in writing. All right, so also, after all that is done, you have that lease and everything in hand, you have been approved with the Section 8 Housing Authority. There is a final approval that has to be done, which is a Housing Authority inspection. All right, so it just makes sure that the unit meets the HUD housing quality standards. The inspections cover working plumbing and electricity, no pet infestations, that you have secure windows and doors, and heating and cooling systems. Everything is working, right? A habitable home, as we talked about. All right. So then you have already discussed your lease and everything with the tenant. You have understood, you have had an in-person or on Zoom or on call meeting, and you've discussed these things. You got the agreement. So then you're going to actually sign this lease agreement and the Section 8 contract. All right. And that is it. That is it on how to stream Section 8 tenants effectively, guys. All this is for rental assistance, housing assistance. If you need other support out there, there is a guy who is a Section 8 landlord on YouTube. His name is Tim Leak. His name is Tim Leak. All right, so check him out. There's support for you there. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Share it with your other landlords or aspiring landlords for Section 8. All right, and if you have tenants already, some tenants already, and you just want to watch this video, please let them become a subscriber to this channel. All right, because we talk about how to be a good tenant. We talk about all kinds of things about Section 8 and just affordable housing in general. All right, so I help them know some of their legal rights. I hope you know some of your legal rights, all of that. I love you. I'll see you in the future on the next video.